This is Sam Black with Drafting Archetypes, and today I'm going to be discussing Temur in Tarkir Dragonstorm. As always, the notes are available to follow along at patreon.com/draftingarchetypes. Temur is the second most successful clan behind Mardu, but the third most drafted, and the gaps between 1, 2, and 3 are pretty big. It's also behind Jeskai. It's drafted very, very close to as much as Sultai, a tiny bit more, I think, but within margin of error. So that's I don't know how significant all that stuff really is, especially since the categorizations get kind of weird in terms of drafting 3 versus 3 in a splash, 2 in a splash, whatever. But I do think that there's a reasonably appreciable difference where most Mardu, then Jeskai, then Temur and Sultai, at least Abzan, in terms of amount they're drafted. And it's arguably notable that Temur performs second best, but I think not that significant because of what I'm going to get into with Temur, which is that I'm skeptical about how much it's a thing. Which is weird to say when I'm saying it's drafted a lot. I'll explain. So first of all, Temur is not an aggro deck. It's somewhere between mid-range and what I would call big proactive. You're not looking to play 2 mana creatures that attack well. Basically full stop. The best performing 2 mana commons in Temur are the 3 2 mana. The 3 Temur exiles, the green one, the red one, and the blue one, followed by Sarkhan's Resolve, the plummet giant growth, and then creatures that fix your mana. Anak Wayfarer, Embermouth Sentinel, the Devotees, specifically Sultai and Temur rather than Jeskai, which again points to how much this deck is not really looking to attack. You're not looking for threats. You're looking for cheap cards that set up your late game. You're looking for removal. You're looking for mana fixing. You're looking for card advantage. You want your cards to still be reasonable when you draw them late. You're not running anyone over. The cards just aren't really there in these colors to do it in a way that makes sense. You're much worse at pushing damage and attacking than red, white, or green, black. You're playing a 3-color deck, so you just don't want to get involved in all that. You're looking to not lose those people and then have stronger late stuff. Similarly, for 3 mana, your best common is Sibsig Appraiser, and then you're looking for stuff like Temur Tawnyback, the Temur hybrid card, 4/3 draw discard, Dragonstorm Globe, the Manolith, and splash removal spells like Stormplane Detainment, the Oblivion Ring, and Dragon's Prey, the Murder. You really want to avoid playing cards like Champion of Dusan and the red 4/2. You really are not looking for power or for creatures that aspire to attack. You're looking for just defensive card advantage, card selection, removal, mana fixing, and then you're looking to win with some combination of rares and dragons. The rare and mythic Temur cards are just kind of crazy across the board. You have Oreni, the 8 mana dragon, the 10/10 that kills your opponent's creatures, Dragonback Assault, the 3 damage to everything with landfall, make a dragon, Roar of Endless Song, the Mammoth Saga, Eshki Dragonclaw, the 4/4 ward that gets bigger and draws cards and you cast a creature and a non-creature, Genesis Ultimatum. Even Temur Battlecrier has been pretty impressive the few times I've played it. Songcrafter Mage is fine, but it's really a lot of the I just think a lot of the best 3-color cards in the set are Temur. But you also don't want to limit yourself to the Temur bombs. If your whole early game is removal and fixing and card selection and defensive creatures, then you shouldn't pass any good rares. You should just put them in your deck regardless of color and figure it out. And the stats on like cards in Temur decks are, there's no evidence that they cost colors of mana. Like they might as well be colorless. Like Sonic Shrieker, does better in Temur than the Temur Uncommon Dragon, which is also one of the best cards. And Sonic Shrieker is the Mardu Dragon, which costs both not Temur colors. So the fixing is easy, especially when you actively want to be playing like Disciples and Globes and Wayfarers. So just like, don't be shy about splashing any good rares in your Temur deck, even ones that require both off colors. Temur is extremely low synergy. Like Harmonize is its mechanic, and it's fine to like put some Harmonize cards in your deck, but you don't really want to like go out of your way to maximize them. And like the mechanic in general honestly makes more sense for Sultai, which has the graveyard theme and wants to play like self-milling stuff, or Jeskai, which like cares about casting your spells multiple times to like get flurry stuff or prowess or whatever. So like Harmonize exists, but not in any way that's like suggesting that you should do a Temur thing with it. The primary synergy that Temur is interested in is dragons. Like I said, that the exiles are your top priority among commons. You're looking for Globe. And just in general, the core strategy of big proactive is best supported by the dragons. They're the big proactive threat. For people who've been following along on the Patreon polls in my Patreon for which topic I'm going to talk about, I've been listing 5-color dragons as a possible topic, separate from Temur, but doing more research into Temur, I kind of don't know that I believe that they're different decks anymore. Like, the best commons are basically all blue and green, the best commons for Temur, outside of Molten Exhale and like maybe Narset's Rebuke. And like in Temur decks, there are about as many red commons that you want as there are white and black commons. So you're really just green, blue plus removal. And I guess sometimes in your seat you happen to see more red removal. But like the other red commons, I mean, like the dragon's fine, I guess, but like none of the creatures that you plan to like cast in the early game make any sense for what Temur's doing. So you're not really red in any meaningful way. So it's hard to like see why you would want to be thinking of yourself as Temur. You should be thinking of yourself as green or green-blue based end color, where early in the draft, you should prepare for the likely outcome that you'll want to play cards of every color, but, prioritize more fixing of a color the more of that color you have. And if you happen to not see a reason to go black over the course of the draft, then you don't worry about black mana. But anytime you see like a top tier card, you shouldn't be like in a mindset where you're looking for Temur stuff. You should be in a mindset where you're looking to just take the powerful cards and make it work out, because everything about how you should be approaching your Temur deck just has all the same incentives, and it's just better to prepare for more colors to get more power. I don't think that there's really like, there's not like, as far as I've seen, a remotely reliable like red-green based Temur deck or any other sort of like meaningfully aggressive in like the curve out type sense Temur deck. I think that the other clans have more just like kind of different ways that you can build the deck and like different strategic approaches and synergies you can look for and stuff. And I think Temur just doesn't because it's so low synergy and the red cards fit so poorly with the blue and green cards that I think you just want to be in, what a lot of people call the like soup decks where you just kind of play whatever. And like the primary draw to like the way that I think people end up deciding that they're drafting Temur is because they get a really strong Temur card and then they just try to like lock in because they want to be sure they can play the strong Temur card. But you are no more likely. In fact, you're almost less likely to be able to play your Temur card if you try to lock in on Temur than if you just try to take fixing, because the fixing will let you play it no matter what ends up happening. Whereas, like, if there aren't good like Temur cards available, and you like try to like force that, you might end up needing to like pivot out of it because you don't have fixing. I don't know. It's pretty unlikely that you're going to take like Aurora of Endless Song and not find a way to put it in your deck no matter how you approach things. But I just think your deck's going to be better if you approach things in a way that's like not committed to like being specifically 3-color. So yeah, that's basically what I have to say here. So like key takeaways, Temur is like not a real deck or clan. Like it is, you can be successful in a deck that happens to be primarily or exclusively blue, green, and red. But I don't think it should have any real identity in terms of like how you're thinking about your draft or how you're evaluating cards or what you're looking for. Like it has no meaningful, unique mechanic or synergy, and trying to find one and force one and maximize one, I think is just always going to be a trap. The draw to playing these colors is just the concentration of power in the gold cards, and it's a fine way to like get early removal, and you need to just like not prioritize red creatures and expect that red is gonna be not one of your primary colors. I think like the only reason that you would want to try to be like heavy red in Temur is if you're trying to cast like the red 2/4/5 rare dragon, just because that needs double red. But even then, you're still just gonna run into like the fact that there aren't very many red cards you're gonna want in your deck. And I think you just need to like, okay, well, I guess I'll prioritize like red duels and like fixing more so that I can make red work. But I'm not going to try to like play 10 or more red cards in my deck or anything. So for anyone who's been like, yeah, I've been trying to like learn how to draft Temur, all my Temur decks just like turn into soup, like my advice is great. That's correct. Your decks that like start out Temur should not be constrained to those colors. There's no reason to like lock in on those colors, and that's fine. Like this isn't saying anything about like cards or colors that you need to avoid or anything. It's just being realistic about the set composition and the like mechanical overlap and the costs and benefits of the things that are available to you. So that's my thesis on drafting Temur, and or maybe not really drafting Temur so much as drafting 5-color, well, N color green that like happens to land on Temur is how I would end up drafting Temur, I think. So pretty simple, not a lot to explore in terms of like nuance, because you're basically just taking the good cards and the removal and the fixing, and it's like really a pretty clean like bombs removal fixing, unless you're desperate enough for fixing that you have to move it up above removal. But I will say that you generally want to prioritize removal over fixing, especially just stuff like, dual lands, like replacement level fixing. I think that I've found that, once you factor in playing globes and monuments and devotees and like, even Emberheart Sentinel or whatever, you can find a way to make your mana, or Embermouth Sentinel rather, you can find a way to make your mana work, and the removal is really, really important. So your pick order should be a very clear bombs, then removal, then card advantage selection type stuff like Sib Appraiser and like Wayfarer and stuff. That's like kind of fixing, but like the monuments are also in this space where they're like better than other fixing because they're also card advantage. It's like bombs removal, card advantage, then fixing, then defensive stuff. And I guess dragons in there somewhere, maybe above the defensive stuff, maybe above the fixing. Like the dragons, not all dragons are created equal, right? Like uncommon dragons are like in the bomby type category, and then the common dragons are like in the below fixing, like just filling out your deck with playables type category for the most part. And yeah, I think it's like pretty simple from there. So I'm going to turn it over to chat for questions and further discussion. As always, I want to thank the newest patrons this week. So, Wheatley, thank you very much for your support. It's really appreciated. And if anyone else is interested in joining the Drafting Archetypes Patreon, check out patreon.com/draftingarchetypes. So, questions. How do you feel about globes in a dragon-focused Temur deck? I think that the globes are good. I think that they, like, it's, behind Sib Appraiser, probably usually ahead of, like, Enoch Wayfarer. So kind of like in like the top tier of fixing, I guess, basically. Some amount of curved considerations and how much you need your fixing and how many dragons you have and stuff like that. But like early in the draft, I think you want to assume that you really value the powerful fixing because you're probably going to have all 5 colors in your deck. You're probably going to have a bunch of dragons. It's probably going to work well in your curve. So it's a card that you're looking to, take pretty early, right? Like after you, like, I'm not huge on like first picking globe. I think there are some people who do that. I would rather start with like a powerful multicolor card that's putting me into like the powerful multicolor deck space, and then, take globes in the like second to fifth pick type range. Obviously happy to see them later, but like that's where I'm going to start giving them serious consideration. Where does Roamer's routine fit into base green multicolor decks and the format at large? That's the harmonize rampant growth for 3 mana. I think it's generally pretty bad. I think that it's a like play when you're desperate type consideration. Like the fact that it chooses a single color rather than fixing every color once it's resolved makes it worse than Globe. The mana's like tapped rather than like giving you the 1 mana back, which Globe does, which is actually really big. Making the dragons bigger is huge with Globe. Instead of all that, you get the Harmonize, but the Harmonize has like a pretty real cost, and like the ramping that you're getting from it is a lot weaker. This question continues with, I had a deck with Dragonback Assault, and it was obviously good there for the extra land drops, but otherwise, I'm confused when it's optimal to include just a 4-man's Globe. Yeah, like, it can make sense if you have Dragonback Assault or Areni, or like some real reason to want like a lot of mana and a lot of lands, maybe, Death Begets or whatever. But for the most part, it's just not where you want to be. It's like, if you're like super desperate for fixing, but like I'd rather have an Embermouth Sentinel, I think it's just like a lot worse than the alternatives. in almost all cases. Do you consider the Five Color Dragons podcast done now? Yeah, I mean, we don't have that much more time before we're on to Final Fantasy. I certainly won't be doing a separate Five Color Dragons podcast. If you have any questions about Five Color Dragons, or whether there's anything that's different about it in Temur or anything like that, I would field those now. Is there ever a reason to go for a more streamlined or aggro Temur deck? Or are the relevant cards, Champion of Dusan, Shock Brigade, just better elsewhere? Yeah, I don't think trying to draft like red, green, splash blue aggro, curving like Shock Brigade into Champion of Dusan, and like backing it up with like the harmonized bounce spell is like I don't think that's going to be a good deck. I don't think, like, you might be able to point to like, hey, this person did it in trophied, or I've been forcing that and it works sometimes or whatever. But like looking over the trophy decks in Temur, like none of them look anything like that. They're all just like, removal into big stuff. I don't think that this is like something that's like really good that's slept on. Like, I don't see why you would want to do it. I don't know. Like the Champion of Dusan has clear synergies with like the +1/+1 counter stuff. Shock Brigade has clear synergies with like the go wide stuff that Marty's offering. Like they play very well in different homes with different support, and there's not like neither one is particularly exciting without the support, and you're not really going to be supporting either of them in Temur. So I just don't see a reason to try to do it. I'm curious about the 3-drop creature situation. Red 4/2 Panther and Green Champion are usually not wanted, and I completely agree with that. Fairly similar. Temur Tonyback, on the other hand, is actively good. I agree with that. Is this because you still need a 3-drop or 2 for the curve, and Tonyback is available enough that it pushes lesser cards completely out of contention, or is Tonyback so much better than the other two mentioned? Or are we overvaluing Tonyback and you could cut those from good lists too? All of these are true. I think that it is okay, like it is conceivable that you could have a deck that doesn't want to play Tonyback, but it would be unlikely. I think the third toughness is really big. There are a lot of 2-power creatures. It is a much better creature both defensively and offensively, and looting is a super big deal. Like that's meaningful card selection, and it's just like way bigger than the upside from the other creatures, in addition to just like having better stats. And if you're like really Temur, it's not hard to imagine that like the hybrid casting cost can actually be easier than like in particular red 2, where if you're missing red you just can't cast it, whereas if you're missing red you can just cast Temur Tonyback on turn 4 and that's fine. So I think Temur Tonyback is like the difference, like when cards cost the same amount of mana, the difference in output between like a bad card, a medium card, and a great card is not very much. Like an extra power or toughness can be a huge deal. An extra line of text, an extra keyword, like you're spending exactly the same amount. So when you get something like better, that's just like free value. And for 3 mana at common, you're not getting that much total stuff. That many numbers, that many keywords, that many lines of text, and like +1 number is huge. Like the difference between like a 2/2 flyer and a 2/3 flyer, or a 2/2 flyer and a 3/2 flyer, for example, is like very big. And I mean, a 2/2 flyer is terrible. A 2/3 flyer is unexciting. A 3/2 flyer would be pretty good. And yeah, like Tonyback just has like a lot of numbers and a very good text box. Like looting on ETB is pretty big. You want to look at how a card performs in 5-color dragons. Do you think it's better to look at the stats in Temur or 5-color? I suspect that they're going to be very similar, and that they're going to be very similar to the aggregate stats, such that I wouldn't worry very much about it. I would look at whatever was most convenient if I needed a quick answer. And, I think that if you want to like dive deep, you could, go deep into comparing stats in general, stats in five color, stats in Temur, try to figure out like what you think is accounting for the difference, what those things point to. Like going really deep on that with a card can be interesting. But as far as like, quick snapshot, I'm trying to figure out if like, which card I should take during a draft and I want to look at the right number. I think it just doesn't matter very much. I think the numbers are always going like if it flips like which card is better, it means the cards are going to be almost identical. Do you think the blue green leave the graveyard theme has much of a home in Temur? No. I think that specifically, like the 2-mana 2/2 flyer that draws a card when something leaves the graveyard, the blue green uncommon, is just like a strong card, and you can put it in your Temur decks and it'll draw cards sometimes. But like even then, it's not like, a top performing uncommon. It's just like a fine card to play. And I don't think that you're going to be like, again, I don't think that you want to be prioritizing Harmonize. I don't think Renew makes any sense. So stuff shouldn't be leaving your graveyard all that much in Temur. So you can play the stuff that's like fine rate up front and sometimes does something, like the 2/2 flyer, but for the most part, you want to ignore all that stuff. I think the fact that Rescue Leopard can't both loot and block is a major strike against it in Temur. Yeah, like you want your creatures to be good defensively, and Rescue Leopard's terrible defensively. Like if your opponent attacks you with a 2-drop, you can't really block, like you're just trading down. Like, think about like Rescue Leopard or Champion of Dusan compared to Temur Tawnyback when you're playing against like Abzan Disciple or Jeskai Disciple or Enoch Wayfarer that like found a land, or Embermouth Sentinel, or like the 2/1 first strike in white. Like all the 2-drops are like 2-power creatures, and Tawnyback stops all of them, and like Leopard like doesn't want to get anywhere near any of them. It's just a huge difference. Are there any higher mana, unassuming creatures that can provide a lot of virtual card advantage by stabilizing the board? Something like LCI's Panicked Allosaur. I mean, so the thing that's best at that very clearly is the Temur Uncommon Dragon, Kurikik Guardian, or however you pronounce that thing. But a pretty, like, the card that's impressed me most in terms of stabilizing is the 5-mana 3/3 that bounces when it enters. I don't, like, take it early in these decks because I'm generally wanting my 5-mana cards to be dragons so that I can like get the Exile bonuses and the Dragonstorm bonuses and the Globe bonuses and stuff like that. But if you don't have as many dragons as you want, or if you, do have some like mediocre common dragons and you don't have a ton of synergies, then like that Ice Ridge Serpent has been, I think that's the name of the 3/3 advances, has been like a lot better for me as a spell to cast than like the red or blue common dragons. So that would be my pick for like expensive creature that's very good at stabilizing, which is a little bit different than the Panicked Allosaur idea, where the Panicked Allosaur, it's like reach in big numbers, and it's like, Sagu Pummeler aspires to do that kind of thing, but it just like doesn't perform that well. I think like the fact that it dies to Molten Exhale is a pretty big strike against it. But yeah, that's my pick for a creature like 5-drop that's good at stabilizing. You mentioned how popular Temur is and how often it's drafted. Do you think it's an archetype that supports multiple drafters? Is it worth fighting for if you open one of the strong Temur rares? What's a safe off-ramp for pivot? The like 5 color soup type space accommodates as many drafters as want to do it. There's so much fixing in the set, and some people at a table are going to be drafting other decks, and you can like pivot pretty freely between like base blue, base green, I don't know, whatever. You could like, I think that if you just approach your draft as I have this teamer card, I'm going to take fixing, I'm going to play the strong rare, like you never need to pivot so far that you give up on playing the strong rare. And I think that like you should basically treat it as if it supports the entire table, because it's like I don't think you need to like pivot off of it like strategically or philosophically. You're gonna like pivot like exactly what stuff matters in your deck. Like, am I like, do I have like a lot of dragon synergy or not? Like, that might depend on how many other people are prioritizing like the dragons and the globes and stuff. What are my like, what do my 2 and 3 drops look like? There's a bunch of stuff that can shift around based on what other people at the table are prioritizing. Like, what is the nature of my fixing, stuff like that. But I think that there's basically always a way to get it done, even if you have to compete with people. And these teamer rares that you're starting with are like top tier rares. Just like, don't be like, I kind of think the person next to me is teamer. Like, if the person to my right shows me their first 3 picks and they're all teamer cards, and I started my draft with like Aurora of Endless Song, that Aurora of Endless Song is going to be in my deck. Like, I don't care, it'll be fine. The packs are deep, there are like plenty of playables. I'm not worried about it. Hypothetically, if you had enough bombs, removal, and fixing, but had no source of card advantage, how would you augment your deck if you know you can't dig for the bombs and removal? Well, if your whole deck is bombs and removal, you don't need to dig for it. You'll just cast some of them. I think that, if you have like enough bombs and removal, like, okay, so I have like 8 removal spells, 5 bombs, some decent defensive creatures. Like, it sounds like my defensive creatures and removal are gonna like make the game go long enough that I'll cast a bomb and then I'll win. And like, the 0 sources of card advantage question is weird because so many bombs are sources of card advantage, right? Like, look at the like teamer cards, right? Like Oreni, card advantage. Dragonback Assault, card advantage. Roar of Endless Song, card advantage. Eshki Dragonclaw, card advantage. Genesis Ultimatum, card advantage. Teamer Battlecrier isn't, even Songcrafter Mage is. So like almost every teamer rare, literally all but one of them, are card advantage. So you're like, the bombs are card advantage, so you don't have no card advantage if you have bombs. And if you have enough, then it's just like overlap. And if you're saying like, is your deck okay if you don't have a Sig Appraiser or like the, harmonized draw card or whatever thing? Like, yeah, sure. Like, those things are nice, but if you just have like, +1 bomb instead, you're better off. Is blue-red base more of a Jeskai thing or something to avoid? That's a great question. I do think that the like blue-red tempo base is a lot more philosophically in line with Jeskai. As to whether it's something to avoid, I don't like hate the idea, but I haven't seen it executed successfully very much, like either by me or by my opponents. Like, when I'm getting run over by red decks, they're almost always red white or, Jeskai or something, not like straight blue red. And I think it's for the same reason that like I don't think the red cards make sense in Temur. I think the blue cards are just absurdly bad at like doing any remotely aggressive thing, right? Like, you have like the 2/1 renew guy. That's like terrible at getting in, and it's like, you know, redeeming feature is that it like gives you some late game value, which isn't what you want in an aggro deck. Your like blue disciple has defender. Your blue 3-drop that's good is a 2/1 that like can't attack into anything. There's not like a common like 1 mana tempo positive bounce spell. Like the only bounce spells are like sorcery speed, 2 mana uncommon, or like 5 mana creature. I don't know how you're using blue in an aggro deck in any particularly coherent way. So I think that, yeah, I think like base blue red spells is more often like if it has an identity, the identity is going to be similar to Just Guy. And if it doesn't, then it is, just in the like base blue 5-color space. But I still don't like I don't even know what your red cards are going to be if we're not talking about like kind of the Just Guy focused like flurry type stuff like Just Guy Devotee and stuff. What packs/picks do you start taking lands? I mean, I've first picked a tri-land on rare occasion, but I'm pretty happy to like, second through fifth pick tri-lands. As for like just common dual lands, when there's nothing exceptional, like, there's no removal for me, and, no bomb is no removal, and there's not better fixing, right? Like, most of the time, like a Sig or an Anok or something is going to be a priority over the dual lands because I think they're going to help my mana about as much while giving me some card advantage. But if there's not like the better fixing, then, I'll often take a land over, some like fine creature or like a devotee or whatever. So yeah, I think basically I'm usually taking dual lands over devotees, and I'm taking tri-lands probably like just behind premium removal, but like ahead of like second tier removal. Like I'm taking a tri-land over Narset's Rebuke or something. Do you ever slide Nest Guard in as your hold the wall creature to buy you time? I think I've put a Nest Guard in my deck. I think a lot of these decks would rather have a Nest Guard than a 4/2, but it's so much worse than Temur Tawny back that it's pretty rare that it comes to that. If you're at a point with your drafting where you need to play it, that's fine. I don't think it's like an embarrassing card to have in a Temur deck, but I think most of the time that it ends up making your deck, there's something that could have been done in the draft to end up in a deck that didn't need to play it. I had a regular Temur deck, kind of leaning into counters, and was able to draft 2 war efforts with 0 mobilized cards and was amazed how good they are on their own. Is this normal, or should we only play them in more go-wide stuff, and I just got lucky? I mean, it sounds like you drafted the kind of deck that I'm suggesting that you should never try to draft, right? Like, this is, combining the, like, counters and go-wide stuff into, well, I have just, like, some cards that are good at attacking in different decks, and I put them together, and my deck was full of cards that are good at attacking, and, like, you have less synergy than the decks that are focused on the counters or focused on the go wide. But, if you're a high enough power level and a coherent game plan, you can certainly have a playable deck. I just know that those decks represent a much smaller portion of successful Temur decks than the more controlling decks, and the like synergies as an aggro deck are just like clearly less prevalent or less present or weaker than the synergies available to the aggro decks that focus on one of those things. Did you just get lucky? Maybe you found an open lane. Like, these like decks that aren't what you should go to but are successful do exist, and there are times when it is actually the best deck at your seat. And it is good to be able to identify that and maximize it. And like War Effort is a powerful card. And, you could be in a spot where you're seeing it late and it's gonna like it's the best card that's available to you. And so you should like find a way to like make your deck more aggressive to take advantage of it. And you can do that like regardless of what colors you are. So I don't mean for the takeaway here to be like it's illegal to attack in Temur. What I'm trying to like get to is what your mindset should be and what your priorities should be early in a draft when you're starting with Temur cards and you're trying to figure out how to approach the draft. I think that some portion of players, myself included, do like to go like, okay, well, this is the thing that usually works here, but I actually kind of see an opportunity to test something a little more niche. I see some cards that I think that I could like lean into and make something happen here, and like that's totally valid. Those decks can work. There can be something there. It's just not well supported by the set, but it can be supported in your seat or by the packs. And I don't mean to say that, anytime anyone has ever done something that's like outside the scope of what should generally happen, that they like got lucky in their games, but before making bad decisions, or they did something wrong in the draft or any of that. The reason that drafting is so fun is that like the weird corner case decks and like different decks and different angles do come up, very real, very legit, very important to like keep an eye out and see those spots when they happen. It's just like that kind of stuff is like the stuff that's really hard to give general advice on. I talk sometimes about how the podcast is for telling people how to draft in general, and my stream is for showing people how I draft and getting into some of the like more weird stuff that can come up. And like, in a lot of ways, I think of my stream as like the stream versus podcast, where like do as I say, not as I do. The podcast is what I'm suggesting other people should do, and the stream is like what I do that I think won't work for a lot of people. But obviously, I'm not doing it just like to meme or something. I'm doing it because I think that it's like the best thing that I can be doing most of the time. Sometimes I think that it's the thing that's going to teach me the most. But the general case is certainly not the universal case. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind in all aspects of life, certainly in Magic and certainly in draft. But I think that kind of long general aside is a reasonable conclusion here. So I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you for listening. Thank you especially to those in chat for tuning in, and even more especially for the questions. Really appreciated by both me and I assume the other listeners who are looking for this to go a little deeper. So your contributions are valued. That's it for me for this week. I'll be back next week. So have a good week and I'll see you then. Bye.
Prepare for light speed.